Today we're talking about the next god after Heimdallr. I've gotten quite a few questions about this already, and some people have posted their own speculation, but there has been some new information that's been seeping through the cracks basically, and that gives us a much better hint of who this will be, and I've already speculated in the direction. We're gonna break that down in detail today to see what we can do with this information. And I will say that I'm at this point 99% sure that this is the god that we will get, so I think this is definitely worth discussing. And with that, let's talk about the next god. Or should I say goddess? Because the first hint that we got was from a Reddit user called Parmigiano de Mignon, who was watching the Portuguese version of the 2020 god lineup trailer, or rather the English version with Portuguese subtitles. The Portuguese version uses the word uma, with one rising above it all being the full sentence. And uma means an, but is only used to refer to women. Now, this could of course be a translation error, but at the same time I also don't think that Magnolia is likely to refer to a male character in the first place. Also, Hi-Rez has a dedicated translation team for various countries in Europe, so I would be very surprised if they were sloppy with the most important trailer of the year for them. I checked if the German version has the same translation, and I found another interesting hint in that regard there, because the German version could technically just say with one rising above all, as the English version does, but the one would have to have a gender, would either be male or female. The words in question being einer or eine. Hi-Rez specifically avoided using this sentence and using the gendered form here, and as a result the sentence actually sounds a little bit strange, because instead it says a land full of warriors who rise above themselves sometimes. But that refers to multiple warriors when we only have one warrior here that's rising above herself. So they really had to go out of their way to make the sentence awkward in order not to use the gendered form in the German version, which again to me hints that it's the female form, because most gods in Chinese mythology happen to be male, and a female character in itself would already be a huge hint. And then we have the datamined name being Magnolia, and Magnolia flower is the translation for Hua Mulan. And therefore, the assumption that the character will be Mulan, Hua Mulan rather, becomes even more likely. But Hua Mulan as a character seems relatively weird at first glance, because she isn't a goddess. She is a character from folklore, but that's really all she is. However, there are more hints, and most of these were discovered by Reddit user Reina Blaka. The first interesting one is the entire lore of Smite itself. Because if you've been following the story of Persephone's uprising along with Hades against Oloran, there are some interesting ideas behind that. So Oloran is kind of more of the old order, whereas Persephone reflects an uprising against that. And if you haven't looked too deep into it, that maybe just seems like Persephone is the evil one here. But Persephone has the goal of basically putting the gods in their place. She has seen the suffering of humanity for too long and thinks that the gods basically just play with humanity instead of treating them fairly and giving them equal respect. And in order to achieve that, she does all the kidnapping and everything. And her end goal is basically to give humans more, or give mortals more power and have the gods have less power. And that would make perfect sense with Hua Mulan. If Persephone succeeds, at least for a while, then she could bring in Hua Mulan and maybe have her help her on her side, allowing her to be strong enough to fight against the weakened gods. In this context, it's also worth noting that we have had other characters that were maybe equipped with more abilities than Hua Mulan, but they were still not necessarily gods. We had, for example, Medusa, Bakasura, and recently Merlin and King Arthur. Now, some of them have magical weapons and all that, so they still have other powers as such, but I could see Mulan being justified through Persephone's actions, along with the fact that not every character has to be a god in Smite. Reina Blaka also further points out that the visual representation in the trailer makes a lot of sense, with Mulan being that one person that's different, and also being the one that rises above all, because according to a poem that describes the story of Mulan, the Ballad of Mulan, it's called, she is rewarded with the highest honors by her kingdom's ruler due to her military deeds. Or the Khan even asks her just what she wants to have, and she basically declines his offer and just says she wants a camel so she can go back home. So while I already thought before that the trailer would likely be hinting to Mulan, this has a lot more substance through this. Additionally, apparently at some point Ajax already mentioned Mulan as an idea in a previous dev meeting and did not say this as a joke, so she was already considered along with things like the Korean Pantheon and the Arthurians, and we know that the Arthurians actually made it into the game. And even timeline-wise, it would be a pretty good fit when comparing it to the release schedule for the Mulan movie. The new live-action Mulan movie will be coming out on the 25th of March. Now, I actually don't think that it's gonna be super successful because of all the criticism surrounding it, but I think Mulan as a character will be a nice boost for Smite for Hi-Riz either way. And if we look at the current release schedule, we know that Heimdallr is not really completely finished yet, so we'll probably see him in December, and with Hi-Riz at the moment sometimes releasing a god every month, but then sometimes every 2 months, and with the new season coming out, I could imagine them slowing down the release schedule a little bit, so I could see Mulan coming out somewhere in February, so shortly before the movie, and that would be pretty good timing. Now I know that there's another figure from mythology that's worth considering here, and that is Lu Bu. Reddit user DarkCrash96 points out that Lu Bu is also known as the Flying General, which would match with the fly that flies out from the Terracotta Warrior. But at the end of the day, I just can't see it. Yes, he is also one of those who rises above all, but he's just not a woman, and I don't think they would swap genders for a male character and just to fit them in. And it would have, again, been a lot of mistakes on Hi-Riz's part for them to end up with one version specifically avoiding the gender, the German version, and then the Portuguese version specifically using the female gendered form of a word to describe a character. And at the end of the day, we also need to look at profitability. With Hi-Riz knowing how much money they made through King Arthur and through Merlin and how many people that brought to the game, they very well know if it's worth for them to go into more popular characters or if it's better to just stick to the strict frames of what is allowed as a god. And I'm assuming that considering how much those characters were played, they were probably quite profitable as well for Hi-Riz. When you specifically search for Lu Bu on Google with quotation marks, you will find 1,400,000 results. When you search for Mulan, you find 40 million results. If I as a company am looking towards maximizing my profits, I know which choice I'm going with. It also fits pretty well in the release schedule that Hi-Riz provided us with on the Heimdallr panel, because there they said that Heimdallr would be a community requested male character and Baba Yaga would be a community requested female character, and in between we had a surprise character which was unknown in terms of gender or anything. I don't think Mulan is a community requested character because most people probably didn't even think she was up for consideration, so she would very much fit in this surprise slot right here. So that again is just another little hint that makes me think we are very likely to actually see Mulan in game. I even found an old Reddit thread suggesting to put Mulan into the game as a character 3 years ago, and the feedback back then was already pretty positive. It was a small thread, but no one got stuck on the point that she couldn't get in because she wasn't a goddess. So if Mulan actually makes it into the game, what could her kit look like when she isn't a goddess? I think there is enough room for her to make things work here, and that is because there's another character that I could think of that in many ways has a kit that would kind of work for Mulan as well, and that is Hachiman. With the exception of Hachiman's one, his kit is not very magical or anything like that. It doesn't really bring out abilities outside of him being an archer and being good with a blade. So I could see a similar format being used for Mulan. According to her lore, she has been taught in martial arts, sword fighting and archery, as well as being able to ride horses, though there's plenty material to work with. I would, however, also think it would be cool if she is made different from the guard characters in a distinct way, so that her fighting style somehow reflects that she is not a goddess, and maybe her abilities, for example, look a little less over the top, a little more simplistic, and it just focuses more on her combat efficiency. Another incredibly interesting option for her, in my opinion, is the core part of her lore, her being a woman that dresses as a man to hide among the other fighters to not be detected, and keeping up this disguise all the way until she returns home. And I think this could be, for example, used as a mechanic where she can attach herself to a minion group and then kind of auto-follows them and looks like a minion until she attacks someone. It would be very interesting, a very unique mechanic. On the other hand, I think the ability itself would need more than that, because otherwise it would just be too minion dependent in many situations. So we'll see if we see an approach like that being made for her. And if you're wondering how I would feel about Mulan as a character in Smite, I think my suggestions for how her kit could be implemented kind of reflect that already a little bit. I think there are definitely creative options that could be taken here in order to make her an interesting enough character for me to enjoy playing her. And I think it's also a good step for Hi-Rez to just try and pick up more of these very popular characters that are in bigger movies, because at the end of the day, it is a profit and a larger player base that they can get for themselves without really hurting anyone, except for maybe a few people that get really frustrated if anyone is not 100% God. And I also think that a fair bit of Smite's initial success was built upon the very popular characters that they had in the game being gods like Thor and Loki, because of course you have the Marvel universe accompanying that. And if the limitations for gods are being kept too strict, then we'll eventually just run out of options that are feasible for gods. Baba Yaga will definitely still create a lot of hype with people that are from the regions where these myths are popular and from people that are just invested into mythology in general. But I think if you ask a random person on the street if they know Baba Yaga, they probably won't, but they will probably know Thor, or Mulan for that matter. So for me personally, seeing them pick up popular characters is a good approach, because at the end of the day, it may mean that one day we may see the 4 Horsemen in Smite as well, and that's what I'm looking forward to the most if it ever happens. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit the sub button and maybe the bell, it really helps me out. And other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.